Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the class. Today we'll be studying linear graphs and simultaneous linear equation, part 1, Mathematics class 8, chapter 1, Introduction. Let's start the lecture. In this chapter, we'll be studying the x-axis and y-axis. First of all, the y-axis, the arrowhead moving in the y-axis direction. This is the initial position, this is the final position. So change of position along y-axis as shown by this arrowhead. And if we talk about the x-axis, this is the arrowhead which is moving in the x-axis direction. So this is x-axis and this is y-axis. In case if a point initial position is here at point 1 and final position at point 4, then the change of position along y-axis will be called rise. So the definition of rise is the change of position along y-axis. Second is the definition of run, the change of position along x-axis. Now this is the position at point 1 along x-axis, initial position 1, final position 5. So change of position along x-axis. This is y-axis. It's also known as vertical axis, y-axis. Rise along y-axis, rise axis, rise, vertical change along y-axis, vertical change of position along y-axis. This is x-axis, also known as horizontal axis, x-axis, run along x-axis, run axis or simple run, or horizontally change of position along x-axis and horizontally change along x-axis. Now we will be talking about gradient. Gradient is basically slope of line. The lines that are present in a graph, they are having some slope, and there are two types of slope, steep slope and gentle slope. Now steep slope is having angle of like 45 degree, 60 degree, 75 degree, 85 degree. Gentle slope having the measurement angle of 3 degree, 4 degree, 5 degree, 7 degree. The definition of gradient is that rise divided by run. Rise is along y-axis and run is along x-axis. So rise is basically vertical change of position along y-axis and run is basically horizontally change of position along x-axis. So gradient is equal to rise divided by run. Now I will describe that the run is basically final location of point along x-axis minus initial location of point along x-axis. Now this is the movement along x-axis, horizontal axis. So initial position of a point was at point 1, final position at point 5. So the run will be equal to 5 minus 1. Rise is basically final location of point along y-axis minus initial location of point along y-axis. So this is y-axis. Initial position of a point is at point 1 and the final position is at point 4. So rise is basically final location of point along y-axis minus initial location of point along y-axis. Now types of gradient, positive gradient and negative gradient. What is positive gradient is basically when a slope of line, this is slanting line or line of a graph, this is x-axis, this is y-axis. Now we'll be calling this line as positive gradient because when it will moving from left to right in upward direction, moving upward direction from left to right, it is called positive gradient. Now we'll be talking negative gradient. Negative gradient is basically when the line is moving from left to right downward. So this is negative gradient. The direction of arrowhead is shown in the figure, and this is positive gradient as the direction of arrowhead which has been shown in the figure. Now the definition of gradient. What is gradient? Difference between final point location and initial point location along y-axis divided by difference between final point location and initial point location along x-axis. Or simply we can say gradient is equal to rise divided by run, or gradient is equal to vertical change along y-axis divided by horizontal change along x-axis. So this is the initial position of a point and this is the final position. So this along x-axis movement is horizontal change along x-axis and this is vertical change along y-axis. Now in this diagram it will be more clear that this is the point A having point 0 and 1 in the graph. This is horizontal change axis, x-axis, run axis. This is vertical change axis, vertical axis, y-axis, rise axis. Now initial point was A, 0 and 1. 0 means along x-axis its position is 0, this is -1, this is 1, 2, 3. So along x-axis this point is 0 and along y-axis this is located at point 1. Along y-axis this position is 1 and along x-axis its position is 0. So A is 0 and 1. Point B is 2 and 5. 2 means along x-axis its position is at point 2 and along y-axis its position is 5. This is y-axis, its position is 5 and this is x-axis, this whole is x-axis, position is 2. So we can write the B point 2, 5. 2 means it's on second point along x-axis, 5 means it's on fifth point along y-axis. So when this line originates, initial position was at point A, 0, 1. Horizontal change takes place and it's moved from 0 to point 2. And vertical change which was 1 and final position at 5. So the vertical change, initial point at point 1, final point 5. So the vertical change 5 minus 1, that is 4, and horizontal change 2 minus 0 is 2. So this is positive gradient because the direction of arrowhead, it is clear that this line is moving from left to right upward. Now in this second case, the graph at point A is 1 and 7 initial position, final position point B 3 and 3. Now this line is moving from left to right downward direction. So this is negative gradient. Vertical change of position, this because initial position at point 7 and final position at point 3. So vertical change is, what we can say is that 3 minus 7. Final position at 3, initial position at 7 along y-axis. So we can say 3 minus 7 is equal to minus 4. And along x-axis, its position was at point 1, initial position, final position at point 3. So horizontal change of position along x-axis is 3 minus 1, that is 2. So we can see this is the negative gradient moving from left to right downward. With this, we come to the end of this part of lecture. Take care. Allah Hafiz.